By the way, there's a lot of seats over here for you in the back of the room. So well, we won't hurt you. There's even a lot of front row seats. But Jim, it's not that hard to come down to Newport, as the mayor said. There could be worse places to come to. The mayor talked about 2 Hall of Fames in Newport, and I feel like we've kind of got an industry Hall of Fame here on this panel. We've got, I think everyone on this panel has over 30 years of experience. So we're almost 50 years together, but we've been doing this for a long time. We have one new member of the panel, and I'll introduce him in a second. Usually we do this at the end of the conference, but we're here now to start it off. So I'm going to go right to the panel and start with Kevin Casey. Kevin is the president of Comcast Northeast. And Kevin, talk to us about your region and how things have changed over the past year.
Well, so the Northeast Division is really the Northeast corridor, so from, call it North Carolina to Canada. It's a tremendous business. Our principal competitor is, landline competitor is Verizon, so we're kind of lined up in their territory, and of course a host of video providers now. I think Mark mentioned in about 50 years what's changed. You know, we've gone from, if you think back maybe a dozen years ago, the vast majority of the revenue that our company and the industry made came from video. And today it's certainly far less than 50%, and the real growth is around the diversity of new businesses that really come off the platform. So it's a dynamic business. Wireless now and Wi-Fi has begun to play a major role in our business, and incredibly exciting.
So you talk about video being the roots of the industry, but it's not necessarily the driver anymore. We'll probably get into this a little bit more over time, but how do you integrate it then? As it's changed over time, how do you integrate it?
Well, I think, honestly, we've been an industry that has been really adept at change and evolving to the marketplace. Obviously, technology enabling is a big part of that. We still think video is a big part of our portfolio, so don't get me wrong. I think the growth, when you look at the Comcast growth over the last 20 years, incredible compound, you know, as a shareholder, predictable and stable growth. And it's been both through figuring out how to thread the needle and operate in this sort of changing video environment, but launching new businesses and creating new products as a function of having this broad menu, whether it's now business services. It's one of our fastest growing segments in our company. We just launched mobile. So, and video is a big, helps to, we're also an industry that's done a tremendous job of packaging. And what we have, consumers want. And if we can present it the right way, price it the right way, and enable it in ways that are intuitive for consumers, we'll be successful over the long term.
And we'll talk about that more as we go along. Joining our panel from Charter, I wanted to say Spectrum, but that's the brand name. So last couple of years we've had Tom Adams, and in great New England tradition, we're playing Next Tom Up, if you get that. That's a Bill Belichick line. So the next Tom up.
Probably really wanted Rutledge and not Monahan.
The next Tom up is Tom Monahan. He is the Senior Vice President of Field Operations for Charter. So Tom, tell us a little bit about your role, and Charter is now 2 years into the integration. You have a key role in that from a field operations standpoint.
Correct. So I have responsibility for field operations for half the country for Charter. It's not an even necessarily, because I have 27 of our 41 states. The thing that we've done in terms of integration, what we think is important, so we didn't do one acquisition, we did two, which complicated it more. Multiple billing systems, multiple instances of billing systems. It goes on and on and on about the complexity of necessarily what we've done. But from a field operations perspective, what we've really done, and probably this goes to the network, is really unleash the power of our network. So in the past year, after planning for this, is we're going all digital everywhere in our company. And then when we're done with all digital, in conjunction, I should probably say with all digital, all the way through we're done, we take the next step and unleash the power of the network relative to speeds. So deploying DOCSIS 3.1 or 1 gig capability across the company is going to be extremely important to us in keeping ahead of competition. Obviously, phone, we've done a really good job of that. The dominant phone provider in many areas of the country. And then lastly, to Kevin's earlier point, we're into the mobile business now, which we're really excited about. And one thing I'll echo what Kevin said about the creativity of the cable industry is, if you think of entrepreneurship and what cable has done, think back maybe even 50 years ago. People were running outside when the cable guy came down the block, and they wanted TV, right? And then the same thing happened virtually when we rolled the internet out. Even if it was a meg and a half, now to gig and beyond capabilities. So we're always a step ahead. Phone, nobody thought you could take on an ILEC. We didn't take them on, we beat them in many cases. And now the next venture for us is what? Mobile. So we're really excited as Charter. I think we're all excited as the industry, because I think we have major opportunities to continue on. And I can't wait to see what's next.
So I just want to pick up on one thing that Tom said for 1 second. And phone's been mentioned a few times. Does anybody know who the #1 phone company in America is? Residential phone company. Comcast. No, Comcast is #2. The #1 residential phone company in America is Charter. It's Charter. AT&T is the #3 residential phone company in America. So we'll talk more about mobile as we go along. James Brown is the Executive Vice President of Content Distribution and Marketing for Revolt Media and TV. James, that's the last time I'll call you James, because I'm told the only person who calls him James is Sean Combs. And I don't want you to confuse me for doing that. Yeah, it might happen. JB, tell me about where Revolt stands and how things have evolved over the past year.
I hope to represent both independent and big programmers up here with my friends here. And of course, it's tough. We're in a challenging business as an independent. We're a challenging business as a content provider, period, trying to make sure that we are everywhere that our potential consumers are. When you look at the various platforms, and it's interesting the way that Kevin stated video and what the video business is. I probably look at the video business as something a little different. Like everything that these gentlemen provide and their companies provide are ways that content rides. And when we look at our consumer, our young consumer, they are consuming on all of those various platforms. So, content is where I continue to think that is the business that we continue to be in. When you look at phone service and you try and understand how do people use their phones today. Your phone at home, I have a feeling that not many of us actually have a conversation on there. There are probably alarm services and things like that are used by the phone. It might be some other things, some of the various power and things like that are used by your phone service and things like that. So for us, everything that you all do, how do we get our content there? How do we make sure that we are connecting with that consumer and helping your businesses flourish? Because that's the only way our business is going to flourish. So, our challenges are what type of content that we put on a digital package or in a social platform, and how do we drive them back to one of the various platforms that we actually get money from and help you all to do.
JB, as the only programmer on the panel, I don't want to, as you said, make you responsible for all programmers, big and small. But how does what you're saying differ for you as a smaller provider? And you've been with larger programming groups. How does that differ?
The challenge today is probably consolidation. So when you look at consolidation, it makes it even challenging for the smaller guy, and then it probably makes it challenging for the bigger guy, because if you look at here is all of this, all these networks that I have, and I come to partners up here and say, I need to make a deal for this. Well, there's not enough money to go around for everyone, especially at the high price of sports, the high price of other things. There's just not enough money to go around. So you have to try and figure out, how do you fit in? How does an independent fit into that potential opportunity? Then you also have this other thing called retrans, and how do you fit into that? And those prices continue to go up, the cost of that. And so we're trying to find our way at the same time, and all those things make it difficult. We continue to find our way because we're continuing to grow. When was it? Month before last, we launched on Sling. I know that's a competitor for some, and I think a potential partner for others. But we are continuing to find opportunities on the OTT platforms and continue to do things with our friends up here, and hopefully we'll continue to do more. But there are challenges there, and most of it is just the big guys, bigger programmers competing with the smaller ones. I really hope that we as a business and industry don't lose that entrepreneurship that Tom talked about, because when you think about how this industry grew, it grew because there were these content providers that provided all these various things. There was entrepreneurship, there was diversity, there were things that grew this industry and grew this content. And if we don't watch out, we'll miss out on that because of the consolidation. It will close down the opportunity for the smaller guy. And I think this world that we live in, especially in the US, is so diverse that if we're not flexible enough with our packaging and our pricing, we're gonna miss something. And that's why you see some of these OTT providers with some interesting ways to reach this audience, that if we don't continue to be flexible, we may miss out a little bit. There still will be opportunities, of course, because of broadband pipe and how you have to actually get that content and what they're doing as far as mobile devices. There's still those opportunities. So do you want to be just the pipe, or do you want to be something more than that? Consolidation of AT&T buying DirecTV, AT&T buying Time Warner, lines are being blurred. There's a lot of things that we're trying to juggle.
You're way up here now, JB. I'm going to have to bring
I'm sorry.
I'm not going to bring it down to Paul, right? But I'm going to, the last on the panel is Paul Cronin, last but not least, of course, the Senior Vice President of Field Operations and Customer Experience at Cox Communications. And we were able to lure you back to New England once again this year.
Pretty easy to do.
So tell us what's going on for you at Cox and how your company is evolving.
I think much like Kevin said, for us it's really recognizing we're a broadband company, and we're all about making connections that customers want to make with their broadband network, with the Internet of Things, smart homes, smart cities. And so we're really trying to make sure, Bruce, that our network is where it needs to be so that we can continue to add new services and new products when they come on that customers want them. And that's really where our growth and opportunity is. It's these smart homes and connecting devices that people want, and working with cities. We meet with a lot of cities, governors and mayors, in terms of they're all very anxious to, how do we grow our city? How do we bring business to the city? And one of the ways is having a robust infrastructure that they can attract companies in. And so the whole discussion of smart cities and what can we as an operator like Cox Communications enable for them in that smart city. So we're spending a lot of time in that space, Bruce, really trying to figure out what the next step is. It doesn't diminish the importance of the video in the core video products and the data products and phone products, but clearly the future is in these new robust services that we've got to get in front of and make sure that our network is capable to support it.
You're talking about smart cities. That's probably the first time on this panel that we've said that. How do you make that, and you kind of started to allude to that, how do you make that transition from the core business, from the video, the internet, the voice, into the smart city and maintain, as head of field operations and customer experience, that you're still executing on that level?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with smart cities is that I'm not sure all of the cities know exactly what that means. You go in and you meet with the cities and they know what a smart city is, but we're not exactly sure what it means. And so we spend a lot of time working with them, just understanding what they want to accomplish. And what we're saying is, look, whatever you want to accomplish, Cox has the capabilities, the tools to get you there. But I think it's a general term being used by a lot of cities at this point. They know they want it, they're just not sure exactly what it is. So we're just spending a lot of time with them, really, okay, what do you want to solve? What capability are you looking for? And then matching up what we can offer through our business services group in particular to meet their needs. So I think that's the biggest challenge with smart cities, Bruce.
So you mentioned cities, and I'm going to jump right to it because we have some legislators in this audience, a lot of them. And net neutrality has been a major issue on a federal level. That was resolved, I'll put in question marks, but now it's being addressed more on a state level. And I think, you know, it's important to bring it up again. What does that mean? What does it mean at the state level that's different from the federal level? I'll kick it off with you, Paul, but Tom or Kevin, if you want to join in along the way, please do so.
Yeah, this is an issue that keeps our regulatory affairs and government affairs people very busy. You're right, there was a decision at the, you know, with the chairman making a decision on that, but you have states now going out with legislative fixes, or in some states, executive orders to try to address and take net neutrality.
I think a couple here in New England, actually.
Correct.
Yes.
You know, we ultimately believe that our industry, and certainly the people at this panel, are living within the principles of net neutrality. We support the principles of net neutrality, have continued to live by those, and really think that individual state desires to solve these is not the way to go. This really needs to be solved once and for all at the national level, legislative level. And so we're continuing to work with the cities and towns in the states who have a lot of interest in crafting their own net neutrality bills to really work to a national solution in terms of what we're trying to solve for. But again, our industry and certainly our company is not against the principles of net neutrality, and think that they're important and stuff that we've lived by and continue to commit that we'll continue to live by them as well. So,
Kevin,
Yeah, I think Paul's point around there needs to be this is a solution in search of a problem. We've said that often. We've operated under a net neutrality voluntarily as a function of our NBC acquisition. We've been in this world. We've made every, Mark, David's here. We've talked about this at nauseum. We operate in 14 states in our division, and it's just implausible to me to have 14 different regimens from a legislative perspective, regulatory perspective on how we would deal with this in terms of what that would do to, it would crater innovation, it would add cost. And again, I think cooler heads will hopefully prevail. I think having this settled at a federal level is to give assurances to folks, and I think we can work together as an industry and government to make sure that consumers get the protection that they feel that they need. And yeah, I think that's our point of view.
Yeah, and I agree with Kevin, and both Kevin and Paul. And I'll tell you a quick story. I have 5 children, and you would have thought I had punished them for a month because they thought the internet was going to go off the day before net neutrality. And I'm dead serious. They're like, Dad, you have to tell me what's going on, which I thought was fascinating. But charter is probably, slightly different. Is we've never discriminated, never blocked, never throttled anything. We have we think that way, well, a voluntary, that's our policy. We don't do any of that stuff. So we feel comfortable, probably, and again, not necessarily sure from a regulatory standpoint where this could go, but we feel comfortable where we are.
So you mentioned your 5 children. I was at a conference a little while ago that was talking about centennials, and if anybody doesn't know what centennials are, we need to stop talking just about millennials, because centennials are born in 1997 and below, so they're now in the 20s, and net neutrality is a greater concern to centennials than is climate change. So forget about talking to the people of this audience. What do you say to that 21-year-old? Tom, you talk, who's so concerned about it and blames cable, not Silicon Valley who may have had some issues, what do you say to them to say, we're not the bad guys?
Yeah, and I think that's where the confusion is here, is people don't know, especially as you talk to the younger generation, you know, that they're not as in tune to maybe the details, and maybe that's just my children, but I would say that probably is for most kids. They don't understand that it's not necessarily the cable provider, that it could be somebody else, and where that line is, so to speak. So it's a difficult conversation to say because there's a lot of if-then scenarios, which I think Kevin alluded to. When you're in the 14 states that he alluded to and you got different regulatory invites, to his point of a national view of this would probably be in the best interest of everybody. Mm-hmm.
So how do you change that perspective when you're dealing with maybe consumers being a little bit concerned about cable's role, when they're calling into you, when they're dealing with your customer service? Do you see that reflected in the attitudes of consumers, especially younger ones?
Absolutely. I mean, it's become a political hot button as well. It's kind of a lightning rod in terms of a rallying cry in some regards. And the difficult thing to have, Bruce, is the conversation about, okay, what are we really talking about here? And what are the core principles of it? And where do you see violation happening in terms of our delivery? It's not a conversation you can readily have with a customer because it's a long conversation. Yeah. But when you do get that chance at the State House and others, cooler heads sometimes do prevail, because I think what they're seeing is companies like ours and Kevin's and Charter as well are support what they want. We're trying to support what they want, and we're not out of bounds with what they're looking for. But in some cases, it's just a very political issue at times, and that's a difficult one to get around, because I think there's other agendas there beyond just some of the top line concerns that are being expressed. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but as Kevin, you talked about getting into mobile. I think it's kind of interesting because wouldn't the AT&T packaging of their own programming be a violation of net neutrality, or T-Mobile with Netflix? But consumers don't mind that because it's a benefit. So I'm more thinking on the mobile side. Dealing with younger people, how is that an aspect in rolling out? You now, last report, you had nearly 600,000 mobile customers in America. Is it relevant that the age and the segmentation and the perceptions that may differ among younger people?
Well, look, I think we all know the younger generation lives on these devices. But everybody, I'm not sure there's anybody in this room that doesn't have at least one of them hanging off their belt. So it is a commodity today. It is a necessity. Everybody has one. You think about it's a highly commoditized business. And when you think about for us, we think about it as enhancing the value proposition as we package this to our customers. And we don't see this as a standalone business by any way, shape, or form, just as we do with the integration of all of our products. We think in terms of how does 2 and 2 equal 5? And I think mobile is another dimension of that. It facilitates, as you think about, you just made the point around companies like AT&T having DirecTV now and mobile and on a smaller screen, and it's all happening. We can do that today. We have stream product. We do it with Xfinity Mobile. How you package that, how you create your brand, what's unique about it that you can bring, that's the magic. And I think it cuts across generational within various boundaries. But of course, younger folks, younger generations, this is the mobile generation, and we have to make sure we adapt to that.
JB, I just wanted to quote your chairman or owner, Sean Combs. He said, "I want to be perfectly clear, Revolt is not just a cable television network. That was never the plan. We were always social by design, multi-platform. People try to put it in boxes, And it's not going to be that. It's not going to jump. It's going to jump on your phone. It's going to be on all your screens. Linear cable is not the future. The future is actual brand being a multi-platform provider of premium content. Does that kind of piggyback off of what Kevin was talking about as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, the four that Mr. Combs is on right now with Fox, we co-produced that with Fox. We are looking at all aspects of content and how we produce it, how we are a part of it, and you know where it's located at, and again how we connect the dots between all of it as Revolt. And by doing so, again, we hope that it is value to all of our partners and friends up there.
Last year on the panel, you said hip hop is the new pop, and I don't know if anybody knows this. My son told me this the other day. 7 of the top 10 songs on the Billboard charts are by one artist, and that's Drake. Do you know the last time that ever happened? Never. Never. 7 of the top 10 songs are by Drake. So what does that mean to a company like yours?
For us, hip hop is what drives us. It is the connecting, it's the connector to this young audience. When you begin to look at it worldwide, and that's how we're taking a big picture of it now, is that when you start doing the research and talking to young folks, you will see that it drives them fashion-wise, sports, it all connects together, and it's through this thing called hip-hop that has grown crazily. And part of it is how through hip-hop they actually communicate who they are. It is the way that they describe themselves. When you start talking to these young folks, you begin to understand that hip-hop isn't the only thing they listen to either. It is a combination. You all have built this unbelievable platform again that they can access content from all over the world. And not only access it, but as far as communicating to one another, they are the ones that determine what's hot and what's not. They determine what's hot and what's not fashionable. When you start looking at a Kanye West, that I'm sure everyone says, oh my God, but at the same time, when you look at tennis shoes and the cost, and when he releases a shoe, what that does. Here is this guy that is a hip hop artist that when he releases a shoe, it drives the whole tennis shoe business crazy. And it makes, you can buy that pair one day for $500 and sell it for $1,500 the next day. And hip hop is so inbred in our society today and in this young culture that everyone needs to understand that how powerful it is. When it comes down to politics and the conversations that happen through hip hop on politics, watch this next election, watch how more of the hip hop artists are going to get involved in those conversations and making sure that those conversations are happening amongst these young folks. It is powerful.
Just to pick up on the idea of diversity, obviously you're all dealing with diverse audiences. So Kevin, not just from a programming standpoint, but how is diversity thought of it as far as from a marketing standpoint or even from an operational standpoint? Is it something that you have to think about?
Oh my God, absolutely. You think about whether it's within our workforce and the culture that we create, our brand is an extension, or really is an extension of what we stand for as an organization. You think about, I've often said when you think about business, folks who write business books and they talk about stick to what you're good at. Unfortunately, this industry over the last 50 years, we have to be a lot of things to a lot of different constituencies or we wouldn't be successful, and we can't pick and choose. So we have to be relevant to so many different, essentially the marketplace. And so different messages may appeal. It's generational, it's ethnicity, it's how people think. And So that is always top of mind, whether we're thinking about branding and marketing or product development. It's incredibly important to the long-term success of our company.
Tom, obviously, as Kevin talked about, segmentation when I look at it, the adoption of video is very different now by age. How does it affect you, both diversity in ethnicity and in age, from a field operations standpoint?
Oh, that's a big question. You know, I could probably put it simply to say, from a field operations perspective, we want to match what the community is. If we don't do that, you know, it's almost an extension of the marketing. It doesn't make sense. When you walk into somebody's home and maybe you could speak their language, that's complementary to the customer. That's what's good for us as a business. If we put our employees in those situations, probably not the best experience for the customer, probably not the best experience for the employee. So we're always looking for those ways to put square pegs in square holes, whatever that turns out to be. And when you do that across, you know, the entire country, and you know, for the most part, all three of us are involved in that scenario, it's exactly what Kevin said. If you're not really thinking about that every day, you're going to miss out on something, and you'll drop the ball somewhere, regardless if it comes through marketing all the way to the customer experience when you get inside their home.
From a field operations standpoint, Paul, last year you talked about 14 different channels of field operations. Do you still have those 14? And what are the key channels as far as operations are concerned?
Well, I think one of the challenges in operations, Bruce, is those channels are constantly changing. If you look at some of the things we're constantly surveying, is how do customers want to be interfaced with? You know, what we looked at 5 years ago is very different than today. Consumers generally want hands-off experiences. I either want to do chat with you, I want to do everything online, I want to self-service online, I don't want to talk to you. And so we just need to make sure that we're constantly assessing how consumers' habits and desires are changing in terms of how they want to interface with field ops. And so the traditional view, you schedule the technician comes out, that's changing. Just drop ship me the equipment. You know, the house is already hot, I'll install it myself. Just be there available if I need support after the fact. And so I think that's really where field ops is changing, Bruce. It's really a far more kinds of hands-off experience that consumers are desiring in a lot of sectors of our customer base, particularly the younger folks. They're used to it. They order stuff online. They'll self-install online themselves. So
can they hook up your X1 box is the Contour box? Is that correct? Can customers do that themselves?
Well, for the Contour experience, we're trying to provide probably a more hands-on white glove experience, to be very honest with you. So for that particular product, we do a lot more professional installs intentionally. It's not that you couldn't do it. And certainly on a service perspective, if you want to change a box out, you know, our boxes come out hot, we install them, you could do it. But I think there's more of an intentional hands-on white glove experience for our higher end products that we want to make sure that it gets in, the education is good, et cetera. But I mean, we're installing more and more apartment complexes and condos that are hot all the time, that the modem and the router's in there waiting for them. They just come in and they start to attach their devices and off they go. So we're seeing a lot more of that, Bruce, in our contracts.
Yeah, I mentioned X1. I'm a Comcast customer up in New Hampshire and have X1, and it's a very different experience. And I think you've got the truck out there again this year. Talk to us about X1. One of the things you did, about a year ago, was integrate Netflix into it, and it's really a very different, from a consumer standpoint, a different consumer experience.
Yeah, so you know, obviously we do a lot of work now with Cox as they syndicate X1, and it's really, we call it the X1 ecosystem. It's a platform. We're moving towards all IP. The Netflix is delivered IP over as an app over X1. We have YouTube, we have Pandora. We add, you know, we see that as kind of the library that will continue to grow as we develop new relationships with new content and old, you know, sort of old content that is sort of reimagining their business and coming up with new innovative content. And it's a fantastic platform that is so flexible. It connects yesterday to tomorrow. And gives us incredible flexibility. We have the voice remote capability, so the voice activation, we were really very early on with that. We think that will open up new product ideas and capability. It's also a medium for self-service for customers you can view your bill, pay your bill, troubleshoot, get information. So it is a portal for entertainment information, and the beauty of it is the flexibility and capability of that ecosystem. And really, it's not just the hardware in the home, it's the whole ecosystem. Cloud-based DVR, sign in, essentially ship a box, ship a set-top box. We're moving into a wireless generation of set-top boxes that are all Wi-Fi enabled. So you have a wire into a gateway that provides gigabit broadband, and all you do is activate over Wi-Fi the set-tops that connect to your terminal device, your television. We also, interestingly, we've launched, given having to serve many constituencies and staying adept at the changes in the marketplace, we offer our packages. What you can buy with X1 ecosystem, you can buy and stream it directly to a smart TV, a Samsung smart TV, a Roku Coam device. So we play in a lot of different sandboxes, and we think that is going to be vital to compete and grow in the future.
Did you want to add something, Paul?
Yeah, the whole evolution of the Netflix and the YouTube relationship, to Kevin's point, has been fascinating, and it wasn't too many years ago that they were the enemy at the gate, and now they're very much integrated per the platform.
Yeah.
And 70% of our Contour customers interface with Netflix and use Netflix through the platform, and 60% of them use YouTube. So it's really been a fascinating evolution in our capabilities and really our thoughts around those two as competitors versus just a value add to our, the platform. So that's been an interesting
And I think
one.
to a large degree, you've talked about in the past as being retention devices. That when we hear the term cord cutting in this industry, what often you see a scissors cutting a cable cord. But what I see, the reality is that it's not about those going out the bottom of the funnel or the leaky bucket. That what we're really seeing, in fact, AT&T said their churn has decreased. Those who reported, Cincinnati Bell said their churn has decreased. Dish's churn has decreased. So am I right in saying that when we're looking at this idea of cord cutting, that what we're really seeing is not an increase in disconnects, but more on the connect side? Would any of you agree with that?
In terms of
the overall number, and the other one that JB mentioned is the shift to the internet delivered skinny bundles. That a lot of it is not the actual cord cutting of the cord. The number one internet delivered service, Sling, is owned by the number 4 pay TV company. The number 2 internet delivered service, DirecTV Now, is now owned by the number 1 pay TV company. So what we're seeing is, in my mind, is a lot of share shifting, but still a little bit of a slowdown in acquisitions, more so necessarily than an increase in disconnects. Can anybody address that?
I'm not sure that is relevant across the marketplace. I do think people are shifting. I do think that there is depending upon various parts of the country, I think you have more whether it be Netflix or another OTT is additive to a cable package as opposed to displacing completely. And your statistical analysis would bear out that video consumption has increased. It's just across a broader display of devices. And I think James made the point about his content being relevant. He's got to be everywhere. That's absolutely true. And if you just think about a few years ago, most of the industry went to market with, you know, in the video space was, you know, tonnage and cable channels. Today, it's all you hear is skinny bundle, and it's really about relevance, what I want. And when we make programming changes, it used to be you dropped X channel. Now it's I can't find this show. So you look at the arc of the evolution of the video business, and I think it's a natural progression. Because we have so many different alternatives now out there, and over-the-top broadband, the internet has changed everything, right? Every business model, from transportation to, you know, ultimately now our business, right? Music, there is an industry, look at retail. So if you evolve with that, the world it's still growing, right? So if you can remain relevant, and I think part of that is being able to adapt to a changing marketplace, there's technological innovation. I would also say that I believe, frankly, watching the landscape, is that some of this is going to flush out because there's companies that are perpetually not making money, and it just intuitively, as a business person, is unsustainable. And so there you go with mergers and have to figure out, you know, how folks come together. But this will continue to evolve.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that, is there's a lot of those companies that Kevin's alluded to that have, you know, maybe not making the money that they thought they would, and have huge market caps on top of that. So it's fascinating to see where this is going to go. The thing that I would add is, you know, 2 years ago, prior to our integration, Charter grew video subs, where the whole industry said that's not going to happen. We're not in the same place today. We still think it's a very vibrant business, but I agree with what everybody's saying is you can't just count it as one anymore. You count it across instead of up. And I think that's the fundamental issue of how are we counting. I mean, if you go back to Nielsen's having probably similar issues if you go back to where they started from. So you can kind of make some analogies across the board to say, and I love the analogy Kevin gave, is it's not about the channel, it's about the show now. And again, you can get back to the younger generation. Binging wasn't even around 5 years ago, right? So the whole landscape of what you do today and how you think about it and how you deliver that is evolving as we go.
So we just have I was given the signal, we just have a couple minutes left. So I want to end this panel kind of the way we've ended in prior years, and I want to look ahead. Look ahead, we'll make it short term because so much has changed in the past year. I'll only look 1 year ahead. So Paul, when we're on this panel for the 51st years together, what has changed at that point in time?
I think two things. One, in the video business, I think you're going to see us continue to push harder on our versions of the skinny bundles, because I think your instincts are correct in that we're starting to see a reduction in people leaving the category, the video, to go somewhere else as we get more thoughtful in terms of the options and the alternatives we're offering with our own skinny bundles. I think people are staying with us because now they have some choices. And so I think one of the things in the residential business you'll see is us continuing to push, you know, it doesn't need a set-top box, IP delivered, skinny bundle options. And so I think we'll talk a lot more about that next year and how that has continued to stabilize that video segment in our business. And then the second thing is I think we can't lose sight of the business sector. That is probably one of the healthiest parts of our business. I think you heard it from Kevin as well. The Cox Business Group continues to grow at tremendous rates, and I think we're investing more in that space. And I think each year we'll probably talk a little bit more about the business sector taking on an even larger prominence in our business, in our P&Ls.
One anecdotal note I'll throw out there: the revenue that Charter makes, Charter and Comcast make from business services is about the same as the amount of revenue that Netflix makes domestically. To put in perspective how big the business services are. JB, what are things looking like a year from now?
I would agree with Paul. I think flexibility is going to enter into the business where you'll be able to provide the packaging and the diversity that I think you have to keep up with what's going on in the industry. And I think you know, we have to make sure that we're turning those corners. I think you'll see more of that. the opportunities that with the adding of Netflix and adding of YouTube and Pandora, those are very smart moves. That's where the young consumer is at. We've got to make sure that we're reaching those folks. And then the other thing is, we'll get into the bidding for 21st Century Fox and win. We will win. And won't sell off the RSNs.
So Tom, now that you've had your taste of Newport, you're going to be back here every year, right? So what are you going to be talking about next year?
I mean, I agree with, certainly with what JB and Paul said, but, I think about technology all the time. I'll go back probably 15 years ago, maybe even more. I remember reading in an industry trade magazine, and it makes me think about it all the time. At that time, call it the early 2000s, it said 50% of the technology you're going to see 2 years from now hasn't even been invented yet. So I think about that all the time, and that we could all say may be shrinking over time. So a year from now, it's really almost, you could contemplate some of the unknown in that. And somebody who's in my position in field ops, that could change the way positively and maybe even to a certain point of view negatively, maybe short term, could change the way we do business, which I think is fascinating. So I always think of the technology end of it to see where we can go next.
Kevin, you get the final word.
Oh boy. Well, I would say probably more personalization and mass customization, and the really blurring of wireless and wireline. Mobility will be much more relevant, and new products will emerge as a result of that. And I think this industry is in a great spot.
Thank you. Thank you all. And hopefully we've set up some things for the rest of the show.
Thank you to our panelists. Everybody, please join us next door for our plated lunch and 2 keynote panels, one on the future of media and journalism, and one with the Connecticut and Rhode Island Attorneys General. Thank you.